First of all, though, what about what voters are making of the voice? They're going to decide, remember, not politicians. It's a referendum being asked of the Australian people. So where are we tracking on this in terms of support? Joining me live is Essential Media Managing Director Peter Stahel. Thanks, Eva, for your time. You've been out in the field asking questions about this. So let's get the verdict, beginning on the overall support for the voice. And we're just bracketing this in for yes and no. We know there's some sort of soft and hard opinions on it. But where is this at and where's it trending, importantly?
Well, it's actually relatively stable. Over the last 6 months since we've been asking these questions, it's been at around the 65% mark, and that's the numbers we've got returned today as well. Slightly up from December, 63 to 65, but that's within the margin of error, so we don't want to read too much into that. As you said, it's a forced choice question, as would a referendum question be, so we're only asking people for a black and white read on how they would plan to vote in a referendum if it was held today. But largely, we're looking at pretty stable numbers. And this is despite all of the turmoil that we've seen in both the yes and the no camps over the last couple of months.
Yeah, so you mentioned that overall number, pretty steady, and it's relatively positive. Apologies to our viewers, we had a later section up there on how informed people are, which has been an interesting part of this debate. I'm hoping we'll have the next thing up, because this matters too. State by state, a referendum doesn't just need an overall majority, but a majority in each state. What's the news there for supporters of a voice?
Yeah, well, as you said, we need a supermajority for a successful referendum. And whilst there are some differences, it's largely consistent. So looking at Tasmania and Queensland, you might think maybe there's something to be concerned about there if you are a supporter of the voice. But I'm not seeing any major trend amongst the states that would suggest that the Voice campaign needs to be working very hard in a particular state over another.
Yeah, and there you can see it. So that's the positive in the polling so far. Yeah, South Australia, Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales. So that would be, there's another one you had, we couldn't fit on there with WA, but the point is there's not like a laggard state. If that were to happen and were to emerge, then suddenly the campaigners sort of go there. At the moment, that's not emerging. It is something that's somewhat split in terms of generations, though. Where do they sit on this?
Yeah, there's a really stark divide on generations, and we've combined a number of recent polls to get some figures that and some decent sample sizes on a tighter breakdown of where people of different age groups are at. Over 80% support for the voice amongst people of Generation Z and millennials. And when you compare that to the interwar generation, as we're calling them, or the over 75s, there's a big difference there. Still majority support amongst Gen X, and it's really only those voters aged 55 and over who we aren't seeing a relatively strong support for at the moment. Yeah,
so I guess two different sides will be maybe aiming at those that boomer generation, the one that might be the most up for grabs. The last one on this, we did bring it up before, but we'll talk about it now, because this is the question from the Liberal side in particular. Where's the detail? People don't know about this. So how well informed are people saying they are?
Well, people are saying they're not very informed. It's only a combined 30% of people who say either strongly agree or agree that they feel informed about the voice. That's probably not surprising given the commentary that we're experiencing, the messaging that's coming from the no side of the debate in particular. But it's also because there is a generally low awareness of the detail, and that's something that obviously the opposition leader is trying to harness. When you look at the generational support for the voice and you cross-reference that at where the coalition's base are at the moment, you can see that they're in a tricky position. They're in a position where they risk upsetting their base, taking a stronger position in favour, and that's why the detail argument is working for them, or at least they think it is.
It's interesting too that if that's true, that's how voters do feel, then and we have seen this as well within the overall voice, there's a lot of soft yes. So detail comes in, that pushes people either way. So it's certainly still up for grabs. Let's turn to New South Wales politics quickly. Now, I want to stress what we're talking about here. It's not sort of two-party, prefer the two parties, but how the two leaders are going. Dominic Perrottet, for all the troubles of, a Nazi costume and so on, he's going pretty well and trending the right way on his personal performance, at least, as Premier.
Yeah, his approval rating is ticking upwards, just broken over the 50% mark in our last poll. He's looking at a net positive rating that is more than 20 points ahead of where the former Prime Minister was prior to the federal election. I believe some people are calling him Teflon Dom. I would be, if I was in the Premier's office, I'd be thinking positively about these numbers. One thing to mention is that I think what we're seeing is some relative success in New South Wales from the New South Wales government to reduce the hemorrhaging of voters from the female and younger voter demographics. And I think that these numbers show that it's working for the Premier as well. Potentially because of their
we'll bring up Chris Minns so you can talk about him too. Sorry.
Policies.
Yeah. And we'll bring up Chris Minns just to have the comparison. And voters are here being asked how he's performing as opposition leader, which it's a tough job, isn't it? So his figure's not as good, but we've seen this before, that opposition leaders win elections even though they are seemingly not as popular.
Yeah, that's right. It's quite usual for opposition leaders to not enjoy the same kind of approval ratings as incumbents. But these are still relatively positive numbers for the opposition leader. Yeah. As you said yourself, he's got a huge challenge ahead of him in terms of being relatively unknown, a government that's seeking to come into power after more than 10 years in opposition, and a relatively popular Premier. Yes, these aren't great numbers, but they're certainly not terrible either.
Clearly net positive, so I don't think his camp will be too worried, but not taking anything for granted. Peter Stahel, great to get your thoughts. Thank you.